it seems that they can do that. They can also, some of the other things are direct energy weapons that burn people, has been, I mean, this is not new technology. This goes back to the 70s and 80s when the Russians did it with our embassy in Moscow. It was used, I think, in the Cuban embassy at all. So it's nothing new. I mean, this is simply the older technology that they're working on much more sophisticated stuff now. And it's like even using brain computer interfaces and how that can happen and how you can reverse that to have the computer feed the brain as opposed to the brain feed the computer. So, those kinds of things are being developed now too. And I think there's over 100 patents in terms of different energy type weapons and chip type technology, things of that nature. So, I mean, this has not been really investigated by anybody to any great degree or extent at all, and it should be, because you cannot trust these people. That down through we've got the historical record of what governments have done with the technologies as they were developing them. They were using them on people unwittingly. People didn't know it was happening. And they were testing them just in the public domain.
Hi there, my name's Carl Clark, and I've been involved in the covert harassment for many years, going back to the 80s. I was going to the conference this year, giving my statements and testimony, and lo and behold, I get an accident, a small bruise that's turned into a massive leg infection. I've had 5 operations on it so far, and I've been told I'm still not healed, so I will be having other operations and skin grafts. And this is from one little trip on a curb. So look, going back some years, I've worked with several agencies, US, Israeli, British, and I first had awareness of the area around TIs when I worked with the Israelis and how we were harassing people and going into their houses, moving things, generally harassing people, stalking them, following them about, just so they were aware that something was happening. And this was all to put their minds not at ease, but the opposite. So I've now spent from the 1980 to 2003 in that area. I became Christian, and from then I've sort of changed my life around, and also been in a marriage of 26 years which failed because of that. Got lovely kids, got a lovely wife, and everything seemed, how can I put it, hunky-dory, as we say in England. But I got elected for my work in the community. I became a councillor for the Christian People's Alliance, and I was the only one in the country. So I got all the what can I say? I got all the respect back, which I lost because of all the what's it called? Oh, I forgot. I'm going to stop there.
Hello, I'm Melanie Fritschan, the president of a human rights association that is called the International Coalition Against Electronic Torture and Robotization of Living Beings, in short ICATOR. Today I'm speaking to you to comment on a video that was made by Dr. Todd Grande, who is a psychiatrist or a psychologist, where he speaks about targeted individuals, and it's called What is Called a Targeted Individual. And I would like to respond on a few of these of the statements that are made in this video. So Dr. Todd Grande gives his opinion about what could be happening with a group of people that call themselves targeted individuals. He first sets out to explain what we usually understand as traditional stalking or unwanted pursuit behavior, when one person, person A, stalks and harasses another person, person B. He describes it as fairly common. He then goes on describing the difference with organized stalking, saying it has to involve a group of at least 3 people hired by person A to threaten or spy on person B. He points out that this form of stalking is far less common, according to him, and refers to this form of organized harassment as subjective experiences by certain individuals. He refers to a study published in 2015 where this seemed to affect more female victims than male, and the stalking lasted longer than individual stalking. Most victims did not know who the stalker or the stalkers was or were, and a minority thought it was a former partner. He once again points out the difference to individual stalking, where people would always know who the stalker was. The points listed. He says there's little unwanted communication. Well, in fact, there is an enormous amount of unwanted phone calls inviting the victim to buy something, take part in a survey, invite them to some sales event like visiting their showroom, as well as coming to a free medical exam or being stopped 20 times by cars and passengers claiming having lost their way and looking for a street or a shop. He says that this group is more likely to have increased aggressiveness. I've met hundreds of victims since running various human rights organizations since over 10 years. Apart from 2 or 3 exceptions, I have never been confronted with anyone being aggressive towards me. Most people were very nice and understanding people, empathic, acted very rationally, and had a high level of education. Dr. Grande finishes the enumeration of victims' characteristics with saying they tend to be more delusional. This is in complete contradiction to his opening statement when he says that this video is not made to diagnose anybody. He says that the victims claim, I am being followed by various people I cannot identify. Indeed, as this is an illegal government program, a so-called unacknowledged special access program, the people involved in it are not known to the victim. They are what was called in the former GDR Zersetzungsoperators, employed to destroy the victims and her or his family's lives. The problem with this is that this is public money, the taxpayers' money, misused to perpetrate this hate crime. That means that part of our income taxes are lending and black budgets to run the operations to perpetrate this war crime. Illegal entries into their home with ransacking of their property. As Dr. Grande dismisses these very serious property violations as delusions, I would like to point to 2 written testimonies made by 2 of my former neighbors, Miss M and Mr. F, which were handed in with the Brussels police. So this is my former neighbor, Mrs. M, who describes 2 men, unknown men, that came out of my apartment that presented themselves as real estate agents and said that they were in charge of selling my apartment, which was not the case because I had not put up my apartment for sale. This is the testimony of my other neighbor, former neighbor, Mr. F, who, when I was on holidays, and I could provide the proof to the police that I was on holidays with the airfare tickets, saw a man entering my home, by force, and who he took him for a locksmith. He thought that I had a problem with my door, that it was jammed or whatever, but very clearly it was a forced entry into my home when I had never called a locksmith, and it was also moreover perpetrated when this crime when I was absent, when I was not there, when I was on holidays. This is also, a police report of vandalism done to my car, where there are two witnesses that gave testimony that they were witnesses to this crime. So called for the delusions and regarding the ransacking of the property and the illegal entries into the victim's property. This was concerning the illegal entries into their home and ransacking of their property. And then he goes on saying, some of my neighbors are involved, but not all of them. Dr. Grande puts this claim down to victims thinking that some of the neighbors are good listeners and tend to believe the person, so the victim concludes that they are not involved, whereas others do not believe the person and the victims think that they are involved. Although it may be possible that neighbors may be enrolled in this program in exchange of black money and presents, in my personal case, it seems to be the so-called Zersetzungsoperators. As my neighbors describe people coming from the outside, forcing the lock of my door and entering my apartment illegally to steal and or ransack it, which is part of a psychological terror operation. And that was well known in Stasi times, and been well documented. He goes on saying that gang stalkers is really a version of persecutory and paranoid delusions. Again, Dr. Grande stresses the point that the fact that the victims communicate with each other about their victimization is unhealthy, as it has the negative effect of reinforcing their delusions, according to him. Dr. Grande then goes that far as to say that the victims of organized stalking are actually themselves engaging in stalking behavior. He gives the examples of the Navy Yard shooter Aaron Alexis and the Florida University shooter attorney Maren May. As explained in one of my former videos, perpetrators try to push their victim to commit an act of violence, either against himself or herself or himself in committing suicide, or regrettably, like in some very minor cases, the torturers achieve their goal in making the victim commit an act of violence against others. The final objective always being to destroy the victim's life in achieving psychiatric or criminal incarceration or death. In Alexis's case, he had been trying to contact one of our sister organizations before committing this act, and we find inscriptions like, "End the torment. This is my ELF weapon," and "Better off this way," carved on his shotgun. However, I certainly agree with my Canadian colleague Galina Cordina's assessment when she says the community of this cruel and degrading human experimentation does not condone violence or any act of violence. In the case of Myron May, like most victims, he was highly educated. He was an attorney who, unfortunately, was driven to this very regrettable act of violence, seeing this as the only definite way out to escape his torturers. Myron May sent various packages with documents concerning his targeting to other victims, and I suspect that the fact that he committed this violent act out of desperation on 20th of November 2014, the very day we hosted the world's first covert harassment conference here in Brussels, of which I was one of the main organizers, was not a coincidence. I may add that we had the honor of welcoming former NSA technical director and well-known whistleblower, Mr. William Binney, as our keynote speaker at this conference. Furthermore, just today, I was sent journalist Ella Free's interviews with former Secret Service agent Donald Jackson, considering himself to be a targeted individual and acknowledging this illegal government program. Dr. Grande then goes on saying that most of the information we receive on this non-consensual human experimentation program is from targeted individuals themselves, he says, but not from human health professionals. There are various health professionals, as well as former members of the intelligence services, who have informed the public and their peers about this exponentially growing illegal human experimentation. Dr. John Hall, American licensed physician. Dr. Terry Robertson, American psychiatrist. Dr. Colin Ross, American psychiatrist, Dr. Hildegard Stenninger, American toxologist. From the intelligence community, we have whistleblowers such as William Binney, Kirk Wiebe, Carl Clark, and Dr. Barry Trower. On the subject of organized stalking or gang stalking, as Dr. Grande refers to it, I would like to cite an extract of an interview Dr. Barry Trower gave to my former colleague at the International Center Against Abuse of Covered Technologies, Last Regard. Mr. Trower states in this interview that when you are gang stalked, you are tested for fear. Senior Special Agent Todd Grande, illegally targeted FBI whistleblower who oversaw 26 FBI offices, signed a notarized affidavit under oath on 26th of April 2011 on the issue of gang stalking in the Federal District Court for James Walbert's court case. Again, despite his claims at the beginning that he's not placing any diagnosis, Dr. Grande refers yet once more to targeted individuals as people having these types of delusions. At this point, I would like to show you two examples of visible injuries I have received and that the large majority of targeted individuals receive when victimized by this war crime. So this is the area of my body where quite a large field of nanites have been implanted against my consent. This is bilaterally the inner sides of my thighs and the genitals. Various times, day and night, these are dialed up and radiated, which will then burn the flesh and leave these kind of burn marks. And contrary to Dr. Grande's claims of delusions, we have here visible burn marks. So I hope you can see that. These are X-rays of medical clips implanted into my body without my consent. So we have the clips here and here. I hope you can see that. He also says that targeted individuals describe themselves as having a very high IQ. In the episode on targeted individuals presented by Jesse Ventura on True TV, in the opening statement, when Jesse Ventura interviews psychiatrist Dr. Terry Robertson to better understand the issue of government targeting and of regular citizens, Dr. Robertson explains to him that the victims are a very highly educated group with college degrees and often postgraduate education. Highly educated people. Let us remember that if we believe Dr. Grande, physicians, and in this case mental health physicians, such as Dr. Terry Robinson, would not even exist. As he states earlier in his video, that the information we get about targeted individuals comes from the targeted individuals themselves and not from human health professionals. I myself would like to add to this that one does not exclude the other, as I know various doctors who themselves are illegally targeted and enrolled in this unacknowledged special access program. As it is the case with many lawyers, attorneys, and even judges. I would like to remind you of the Florida State University shooter, attorney Marion May, who was a former prosecutor. In the True TV episode presented by Jesse Ventura dedicated to the growing issue of targeted individuals, we also have the declarations of Judge Judy, who, attacked by directed energy weapons, describes feeling terrorized and confused. As a closing statement, I would like to point out that while Dr. Grande, who seems very uninformed and clearly has not studied this kind of victimization and illegal human experimentation in detail, refers to this crime again as a delusion. He gives the advice to the victims not to engage in any internet discussions, as they will, according to him, only foster the delusions, which can only get worse. He says that this mass delusion, according to him, really is quite dangerous, as targeted individuals believe that everyone is out to get them, which can result in violent action. American COINTELPRO and East German Stasi-Zersetzungstactics are still used to this day. We know from Stasi history and documents that the aim was to disrupt the target's private or family life and to destroy their career, the relationship with their spouse, their reputation in the community, and alienate them from their children. Personally, I have experienced all that. We also know that overall there was a ratio of 4 or 5 authorized Zersetzungsoperators for each targeted group and 3 for each individual. This is in contradiction to what Dr. Grande claims, that the victims would think that everyone is out to get them. Maybe the only claim we can agree on is that organized stalking is perpetrated by a group of at least 3 people persecuting one victim, which is also documented in the operational procedures of the Stasi. We also agree on that we have to prevent violent actions such as mass shootings by victims that have been driven to it via cyber torture and organized stalking tactics designed to achieve this goal. However, we have to solve the problem and ending this crime against the human soul in initiating an international investigation and enacting and or reinforcing appropriate legislation, not in silencing the victims, revealing this crime globally. In this vein, it is therefore very important that the United Nations urgently identifies and explores the predominant psychosocial dynamics of cyber torture and puts an end to it. We also need very ethical mental health professionals and interested and competent to deal with victims of such illegal Zersetzungsoperations, and not uninformed psychiatrists such as Dr. Grande, who clearly does not make any effort to truly study this crime and the devastating psychological consequences it has on his victims. In conclusion, we can just say that mental health professionals such as Dr. Grande, unless he evolves and informs himself better, should not at all be entrusted with the psychological care of this kind of illegal human experimentation, commonly referred to as targeted individuals or the target individual program. The reason for this being that either Dr. Grande is clearly uninformed, and if he remains this way, he cannot provide adequate psychological care and consulting to targeted individuals, as he mistakes an atrocious war crime for a delusion, and thus is prone to place a psychiatric misdiagnosis on the victims of this crime. Or he deliberately spreads disinformation and presents this war crime as a delusion to assist in its cover-up. In this case, he's aiding and abetting one of the most serious war crimes of the 21st century. When listening to Dr. Grandes and other mental health physicians like him, historically, what comes to mind is the doctor's trial in Nuremberg after the end of the Second World War. Defendants committed murders, brutalities, cruelties, tortures, atrocities, and other inhumane acts on prisoners of war and civilians, stigmatized among other vulnerabilities as insane. With the illegal targeted individual program and its rapid global expansion, it seems history is either repeating itself or pursuing its course of atrocities and war crimes aided by an ever more sophisticated technology and the rapid rise of artificial intelligence. Whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it and to institute a new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its power in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson, 4th of July, 1776. I am recording this on 8th of March, International Women's Day 2021. in thinking particularly of all the targeted women maimed and mutilated by this technology, as well as sexually aggressed by means of ICT technology implanted in their genitals, which is then employed to rape electronically from a distance, torture and traumatize the mainly female victims. I am showing you the pictures of my own burn marks inflicted on this International Day dedicated to women's rights. Thank you for your attention. So this was inflicted on me on the International Women's Day, as well as this. So sorry to show you my panties, but and these burn marks made it difficult to walk, and thus made it difficult for me to bring my children to their school. So thank you for your attention, and I really hope that this issue that deserves much more public attention than it is getting until now will now be carried forward by international organizations such as the United Nations. Thank you. Thank you for your interest.
Hello, I'm Derek Robinson, Vice President of the International Coalition Against Electronic Torture and the Robotization of Living Beings, or ICATOR, and President of People Against Covert Torture and Surveillance, or PAX International in the United States. The surveillance and harassment that I'm experiencing began around 1982 while I was in the Navy and stationed at Fort Meade, Maryland, working in support of the National Security Agency, which is headquartered there. I was not confronted directly about what the situation may have been. However, a covert psychological operation campaign started, which was designed to harass me into turning in my clearance and leaving the NSA building, which I finally decided to do sometime during the last year of my enlistment. I was eventually processed out of the Navy honorably, and I had hoped that that would have been the end of my ordeal. However, it was actually just the beginning. The stalkers then followed me back to my hometown of Cincinnati, Ohio, where the harassment from the government has continued and is still ongoing today after nearly 40 years. The harassment I receive includes organized stalking, synthetic telepathy or voice-to-skull technology, thought surveillance, some microwave energy attacks, and ringing in the ears. I believe the perpetrators of this criminal harassment campaign are defense contractors employed by the US Navy, and they have interfered with just about every matter concerning my life, from getting and maintaining a job, social contacts with others, whether friends, family, acquaintances, or potential partners. There's been vehicle tampering, an attempted staged accident, sabotage of equipment, appliances, computers, household items, theft of clothing, a bicycle, and other items, and much more. They continually strive to gain more control of my personal affairs daily, from what colors I wear to what foods I eat, or any activities or projects in which I participate. Soon after I signed onto the internet in late 2003, I discovered that many others are also being surveilled and harassed in similar ways for various reasons and by a variety of actors, including government agencies, corporations, defense contractors, private investigator firms, security guard companies, underground criminal groups, secret societies, and more. I, along with some others, started Freedom from Covert Harassment and Surveillance, or FFCHS, a nonprofit organization formed for organized stalking victims who are being surveilled and/or attacked with microwaves or some sort of directed energy weapons in early 2006. Then there was some drama that happened, and I ended up being voted out in October of 2015. I then started my present nonprofit organization, PAX International, with a similar focus in the following year, 2016. PAX International joined forces with ICATOR officially in July of 2020. Although we as a community established a liaison with the Office of the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Torture, Nils Melzer, in February of last year. Professor Nils Melzer, the UN Special Rapporteur, launched an investigation into our claims as cyber torture victims, as we are now designated by his office, at that time declaring that he would eradicate cyber torture from the planet in 2 to 4 years. We are gradually becoming more active and effective with our mutual missions, particularly since the recent publicizing of the plight of the US diplomats to Cuba and China, who are generally believed to have been attacked with microwave weapons. And now, as we at ICATOR start to prepare for litigation about our issues, our community is beginning to look forward to the day when we will regain our lives, dwell in peace, and enjoy our constitutionally guaranteed rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Thank you for listening.
Hello, my name is Galina Kurdina. I live in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Today I would like to talk about a video of Dr. Grande, a video with name "What is a targeted individual, gang stalking or group stalking?" I would like to support testimony of Melanie Frichen, who is a president of non-profit organization ICATOR. I am a board member of this organization. In my testimony, I will use abbreviation TI instead of targeted individual and TIs instead of targeted individuals. So I watched this video and I would like to comment on the main fabrications and lies in this video by Dr. Grande. First, in most cases, gang stalking is in fact organized by governments and their institutions like law enforcement, secret police, and so on. It may be committed against oppositioners, dissidents, protesters, people with views that governments do not like. It's true. However, victims of gang stalking may be victims of classified experiments like mind control experimentation, whistleblowers, people who try to leave their country for another country, and other people. Second, it is not true what Dr. Grande states in his video, that TIs do not get written or visual communications, since TIs are not only spied, secretly photographed and slandered, but they may receive insulting and threatening phone calls. I testify and confirm I myself received these phone calls, experienced beating, hitting, street theater. Their property may be severely vandalized. I experienced all these things, and I confirm that all this is true. Third, it is not true that people who report gang stalking are mostly delusional, since most of genuine targeted individuals are sane. Of course, there may be some mentally unstable people who claim that they are persecuted but in fact these are just their delusions. But we do not talk about them now. TIs report to police and bring evidence of crimes committed against them. They bring photos of vandalized property, medical records, records from private investigators. However, reports of TIs and their evidence are ignored by police because in most cases the gang stalking is organized by governments. Like Canadian police said to me, we work for the government and cannot investigate crimes committed by the government. Gang stalking may last for years and decades, often during lifetime, since causes of gang stalking have always been very serious, like classified military experiments on victims without their informed consent. TIs report that they are followed and watched, stalked by government agencies, physically interfered, victims of electronic hacking, electronic surveillance, victims of electronic harassment and mind control, victims of break-ins in their homes, and all these are not delusions. And TIs have piles of proofs of gang stalking. For example, victims of electronic harassment and mind control have collected a lot of medical records, records from private investigators, psychologists, psychotherapists, and other experts, that they have implants in their systems, that they are victims of V2K and specific electromagnetic effects, which manipulate their minds and bodies. Personally, I have medical records from a toxicologist in the United States of America that I am a victim of specific electromagnetic effects and have nanomaterials in my system that I used as chips to send signals to my mind and body. I have records from a private investigator from America who supported all these conclusions of a medical doctor. I have records from psychotherapists in America who stated that I am a sane person without any delusions or schizophrenia or whatever, psychosis, but I developed post-traumatic stress disorder as a result of psychotronic mind control attacks upon me. Furthermore, I have records report from a technician with conclusion that Galina Kurdina is a victim of brain-computer interface, artificial technology and mind control technology. Key statement was stated by the criminal network, mind control letters. I would like to comment that this war conclusion made after analysis of my video. Special equipment and special programs can extract voices of criminals that are somehow recorded by cameras. When we record our videos, perpetrators may attack us in this periods of times, and their voices may be extracted with special equipment and special programs. So after analysis of one of my videos, technician made such a conclusion that I am a victim of brain-computer interface, artificial intelligence technology, and mind control technology. Key statement was made by the criminal network, mind control letters. Technician also can verify that Galina Kurdina is telling the truth based on the survey that she filled out of criminal activities such as video voyeurism, stalking, cyber harassment, illegal monitoring and surveilling, torture, criminal statement, torture me, cyberbullying and stalking, social engineering and conspiracy to murder. The criminals also admitted that they were attempting to assassinate Galina Kurdina. There is audio evidence to verify that her statements are true and that she is targeted with the use of electronic equipment and military member involvement. The mind control technology is torturing Galina Kurdina. She is feeling the pain. The network is aware pain is intentional and the equipment is being used to harm Galina Kurdina. This is a crime known as torture and is the reason and the cause for her headaches and brain fog that Galina Kurdina is experiencing. I would like to stop this reading because it seems to me that this is enough. Next point. Dr. Grande claims that if targeted individuals report to police, talk to politicians, ask their doctors for help, they actually themselves stalk police, doctors, and politicians. This is very unusual, and I may say, perverted. This is perverted logic of Dr. Grande. TIs do not approve actions of some victims like Aaron Alexis, who killed people, which, in his opinion, were his perpetrators. These extreme actions are not accepted in TI community. Next point. Dr. Grande claims that TIs think that the whole world is after them. It is not true, and often TIs exactly know names of their perpetrators and do not blame innocent people. Like I exactly know names of some of my perpetrators, and I even reported these names to police in Toronto. Just they ignored and neglected my reports. This is another problem. But I know names of some of my perpetrators. And of course, I do not blame other innocent people for this crime. What is interesting in this video by Dr. Grande, his perverted logic. When exactly the same crimes were committed against people in former socialist countries like USSR and Eastern Germany by their secret police agencies, they were immediately admitted and condemned by Western governments. However, when police governments in the USA, Canada, Europe themselves conduct policy of Zersetzung against their own citizens, reports of these crimes are proclaimed delusional. When employees of Canadian and American governments are attacked abroad, like in Cuba, China, in Russia, in Moscow, of course, American, Canadian governments immediately proclaim that Cubans, Russians, Chinese are very bad. But when they themselves, Canadian, American governments, commit the same and even more heinous, more horrible, more horrific crimes against their own citizens in their own countries, they proclaim themselves advanced democracies. TIs who dare to report gang stalking are labeled delusional, paranoid, psychotic, schizophrenics in Canada, America, and other countries. Psychiatry, which labeled sane people with false psychiatric diagnoses in the former socialist countries, was condemned by Western doctors as punitive psychiatry. However, nowadays, when American or Canadian psychiatrists like Dr. Todd Grande label sane TIs with false psychiatric diagnosis without even seeing them, talking to them just indiscriminately and in absentia, everything is okay. Such psychiatrists like Dr. Grande consider themselves great humanists and perfect professionals. Very nice and convenient position of Dr. Grande. Convenient for him and the government that probably pays him for this disinformation. Thank you. Bye.
Hello, my name is Harald Brems. I'm from Berlin in Germany, and I'm a victim of organized stalking and torture with neuroweapons or so-called directed energy weapons. I'm a victim now since 19 years. I'm also concerned from cyber stalking, cyber torture, gaslighting, slander campaigns. People are telling rumors and lies around me. All kinds of sabotage, stuff like that. I'm also the founder of the Initiative Against Electromagnetic Torture in Germany. What is a band of people who are trying to raise awareness about these crimes against humanity that are done with neuroweapons worldwide, not only in Germany. And I'm also working together with ICATOR, what is an association that works on an international level. And what I'm asking you is, please support us, support our association. Support us by doing video statements like this. Make interviews with journalists, write to journalists, write to politicians in your area, or write to artists in your area. This is what you can do, what everybody can do. And it is so important that we all speak out about our problems, that we talk what is going on, because too many too many TIs are too afraid to talk about what is going on in their life. And it is so important to come out with your story. So please help us and let's fight together to solve this problem. Because if we don't solve this problem now, it will concern so many people in the future. And we must stop this. It is absolutely important that we must stop this now. So please help us. Also support your TI organizations in your country and in your area. Get member of these organizations. Help them fight these crimes against mankind. It is so important. Please help us. And also help yourself by talking about what is happening to you. This is what I'm asking you. Thank you very much.
Hi everybody, my name is Wang Xi from Zhejiang Province, China. I encountered this mind control technology in 2019 when I was a freshman. This V2K technology imitated the discussion of my classmates back then, tricking me into believing that the dormitory was equipped with surveillance camera and my privacy was disclosed. I endured this for a long time, but conflicts around me were inevitable. I suspected my classmates and called the police. These were all scams, soon as I found out, but I couldn't explain my abnormal behavior. For these reasons, I was questioned by my teachers and classmates about my mental stability. These are merely a small part of this technology's damage. It has destroyed all my life completely. After that, I spent nearly 2 years searching for information and communicating with other people. I swear to expose this torture. Here, I will give a general overview for this group. In my view, it is a living test carried out on mobile citizens and realized through a military technology. Such military technology is well proven to interfere with specific neurons at critical moments, transmit sound information, and even simulate the direction of sound. It is capable of interfering with vision, reciprocating feelings, and creating artificial telepathy. These capabilities are used to make up your own personal story and scripts in real life. At the beginning, it makes people obfuscate the issue, misleading victims to incorrect cognition. So delicate, ingenious, and well-designed the technical manipulation processes, the victims will not be aware the fact that their behavior has deliberately induced to the degree of typical symptoms of mental illness. By creating the illusion of mental illness in the early stage, they will blame the forthcoming infringement on your own illusion or make you deprived of discourse. All this will render the legal accusation invalid. Thus, the technology has kept this secret undercover and escaped capability. Meanwhile, once the victims can't resist this deception anymore, they will point out motives behind this and perpetrators here and there, so that the story of the victims around the world cannot be consistent. This explains why the victims cannot get sufficient attention and trust from society. Here is a reminder. Being misled and mentally ill is reliant on the construction of personal scripts, which are derived from your subconsciousness and personal experience. The problem is that people of everyday life neither understand the mechanism of neuroscience nor this spine technology weapon system. The technology can remotely acquire thinking information, create emotions, construct subconscious, and transmit sensory information. For example, in the early stage, the technology will simulate the voice of people around you and transmit information to you, making you realize the direction of the voice. In this way, conflicts are easily created, and at the same time, once the victim puts forward this false information, it seems reasonable for people around him to think that he or she has mental disease. What's more overwhelming is, with the help of electromagnetic wave, the technology can make short-circuiting happen in the conscious layer of the brain. Logical thinking and the brain balance are missed due to short-circuiting, so the technology manipulates people in a deep subconscious or emotional state. The decline of consciousness and the dominance of subconsciousness means the incapability of an analytical and logical thinking ability, and a retreat to the stage of conditioning and emotion. This physiological status makes the victim in a subconscious state difficult to recall, think, or even express, and vulnerable to find back their deliberate hypnosis, brainwashing activities. Therefore, the early stage is where the asymmetric information occurs frequently, and it is also the time victims are least likely be too conscious, which is rather convenient for the intentional deception and guidance of the perpetrators. At the same time, the purpose of omnipresent voice to score is to ensure you are away from independent thinking. Your thinking is always induced. From time to time, you will fall into their logic pattern, and then drift unconsciously further and further away. In other words, you are vulnerable to the bombarded and brainwashed information with high intensity that cannot be far away or stopped. It's all happening in your head, and you can't resist receiving the information. They are uneasily creating external stimulation that only victims themselves can feel, so that victims will have wrong cognition to the outside world, and they will force victims to respond with constant pain, to tell someone what happened, or to ask for the truth, or to find a solution. It's not a matter of probability, it's just a matter of time. As a victim, your reaction and its consequences are predictable. Quite in order to achieve real and sustained psychological control, a deep emotional state should be established. It is suggested that fear, shock, and anxiety have a strong and irrepressible effect on the human brain. This means, in essence, emotional trauma facilitates the unconscious state for the purpose of making the cortical inhibition of brain loses its function. When people are exposed to this tricky, cruel, and unknown technology, they are frightened and could not help but tell and explain to the people around them, so as to keep their psychology in a balance. But this reaction is cleaning because the people around you don't have enough knowledge on this weapon system. That's the key. Brain control itself is a category of military technology that hasn't entered public view. What's more, the common medical system cannot identify its injury. The public security system doesn't have jurisdiction to file a case. The Environmental Protection Bureau has loopholes in its supervision, and it is even a blank in China's law in this regard. To say the least, in a nutshell, the technology itself exists in the dark cracks. When you talk about it, your friends cannot help you in this respect. As a matter of fact, instead, he or she will concern about your psychological problems and take you to the psychiatric department for treatment. On the other hand, doctors are of professionalism, and the professionalization itself have multiple meaning. Their professional knowledge is profound. At the same time, it also reflects another meaning, that is, their knowledge is narrow, limited to the sheer mental problems they have already know and the relevant diagnosis process. Thus, this leads to the question that doctors don't care about how the so-called technology of brain control weapons is realized technically. Meanwhile, they can't think outside the box of medical science because psychiatrists have been anchored themselves in the study of their own medical logic so as to be more professional and profound. Do you know why? Any psychiatrist, he himself is facing a great deal of mental pressure every day. He treats a patient who looks fine but may actually have a disease in a very mysterious environment, because his logic pattern is that anyone who turns to him is problematic or has mental needs. Otherwise, why would they go to psychiatry? So, psychiatrists will do their utmost by using their expertise to determine whether the patient is in a state of mental illness or not. Within a short period of time, psychiatrists have limited energy to consider what the patient revels as military weapons. They use their own psychiatric expertise to diagnose whether the content the patient has described is aligned with the criteria of psychosis. As the following, they will give you an outlet by constantly creating a different situation so that you believe you can prove your experience. This, in fact, means to let you prove yourself with mental illness by words and actions spontaneously and vigorously. It means to make the technical representation reflected in mental diseases so as to better conceal the dark and harmful means, and vice versa. These means, however, are not useless. All these things you discover the time when you see it, you will be classified into existing mental illness and even different categories. You need to understand these things. If so, you will acknowledge that this is their spy technology, a military technology. Many victims will assume it is illegal investigation of crimes or some operations of the gangsters, because these technical operators always disguised as a public security system or government personnel to disguise the victims. And who will be benefit from it then? Besides, the fact is not like that. Even if it is an illegal investigation, it still remains a civil case. This is because the information is sifted. People of everyday life do not understand the actual operation of the public security system, which decides their speculation and judgment of such level. When you attempt to prove with your own symptoms and experiences, for example, there is a voice transmitted from school, they will argue that you are auditory hallucination. If your vision is blurred or altered, they will see that you are visual hallucination. In fact, the classification of psychosis itself is very complicated, while its purpose is not. Honestly speaking, the classification of psychosis is a paradox in itself, by virtue of which is an attempt for covering up the development of some pertinent sophisticated technologies. In it lies the darkest side of society, while it is presented to every pleasant and positive person. This is the secret of the first magnitude. The more important the secret is, the more it should be presented to the public, so that the secret itself cannot be disclosed. Everyone thinks that how could the stuff we watch every day be secrets? This is the best hidden place to keep the secrets of the first magnitude. Since the 1950s, it has nearly become a synonym of political persecution in the Soviet Union. It merits attention that schizophrenia is only diagnosed by symptoms, with focal or causes unknown, and cannot be detected objectively. In addition, psychiatry is a subject in the sense of statistic, that is to say, compared with the vast majority of people, the abnormal phenomena will be statistically categorized into this large dissimilar framework. At the same time, it is also a subject in the sense of correction, absorbing new abnormal phenomena continuously and makes it a typical symptom, and then become a new criterion for diagnosing mental illness. For example, this subjectivity can only describe the feelings of victims subject to brain control technology. Those people will not be deemed as victims in society, but are forced to be in group of mental illness, and then enrich the subject with their own symptoms. Because the diagnosis of mental illness itself only relies on the external symptoms, and there is not even enough advanced equipment to identify and confirm it. In fact, due to the increasingly refinement of professionals, the experts are more and more specialized on a certain area, so that their expertise is common for psychiatrists who don't know how to use the radio, holding a hammer, and takes everything as a nail. Therefore, even the authoritative judgments recognized by the society cannot distinguish the victims of brain control technology from the patients with mental illness. This, in some degree, will deprive the victims of discourse and litigation and attention of society as well. Thus, the victims of brain control technology are compelled to be marginalized. The perpetrators deliberately select the underprivileged at the bottom of a social ladder as the object for this technology experiment. The extreme information asymmetry and the tricky and ruthless nature of the technology itself make this special victim group face a major obstacle to expose and express themselves. More investigation and investment are required. It is not difficult to find that these poor victims are almost evenly distributed in all regions of the country, and its number is even proportional to the population in this region. The manipulators are consciously controlling the numbers. It's more like an experiment, because if it's a terrorist, they will focus on a certain area to create panic. As a matter of fact, as CCTV 7 military channel reports, it is used to test a new type of brain-controlled weapon. The subjects who are selected secretly will be socially isolated with decreased immunity, which will lead to various diseases and death afterwards. Which senior intelligence departments or the military hope to test the influence of brain manipulation on the living human body, so as to make it easier to subdue people without fighting in battlefield in the time to come. After all, the task is to test the impact on the human brain. How could you expect a convincing experiment result when you conduct them on mice? Chinese victims have detected abnormal signals around them with signal detection devices, but these are not sufficient or authoritative to support the fact of their being victimized. I learned that some members of ICATOR have conducted tests for toxicology and nanomaterials used for chips are found in the body. At the same time, they are also actively contacting universities to do a professional test to be used in the lawsuit and to promote legislation. This gives us hope, and I hope they can keep progressing. I am a law-abiding Christian, involuntarily and unintentionally involved in this torture. I think this is a major event involving public interests and human rights. I hope that more and more people will pay attention to this issue, help promote the course of testing, and advance the construction of relevant laws. There will be the day when the truth becomes known to all.
My name is Toshiko Namiki. I am a targeted individual in Japan. I live in Tokyo. My nightmare started in 1998 with repeated break-ins. It was in 2012 I recognized the existence of the organized crime called gang stalking and electronic harassment, also known as cyber torture. By that time, I had relocated 8 times in order to escape from unbelievable and horrible harassment from the neighbors. Since I did not know about the organized crime at all, I believed all of those harassments were being done by my neighbors wherever I went. In 1998, all of a sudden my apartment was broken in and sickening chemicals were sprayed relentlessly on the balcony. The following year, a surrender campaign and gaslighting started at the workplace. As harassment became intense, I had to quit my job and moved to my parents' home in 2001. My parents lived there for a long time and had good relations with their neighbors. It seems to me that the attack was almost stopped. I started working again at a new workplace and enjoyed a quiet and peaceful time for some years. The situation, however, drastically changed after my father died, and then an old woman of the next house died. The family of the old lady's nephew has moved into the next house soon after her death. Then harassment started again. The couple of the next house sneaked into our garden at midnight and, while we were out, began spraying pesticide on the plants in our garden and even on the doors and the windows of our house. I asked the police for help, but it didn't work. My health has gradually deteriorated. I became hypersensitive to chemicals and fled to my friend's home. After a while, my mother in her 80s, staying in the house, became ill. She could hardly make a voice because of the effect of sprayed pesticides. I immediately took her out of the house. But my brother did not believe what I explained about the dangerous situation. and he stubbornly stayed at home. Shortly after, he suffered from facial neuralgia and was hospitalized. I had to quit my job again. I walked around in the town to find an apartment where my mother and I could live with peace of mind. We moved several times after that. Each time we changed the location, other attacks were added. In 2005, we moved to a condominium along a river. Very severe microwave attack began from the beginning we moved in. My physical condition got worse very soon. I began losing many of my belongings, and I had a dementia symptom. Temporarily, I was diagnosed with a hypersensitive to electromagnetic wave. 4 years later, we moved to a newly built condo. But it didn't take long before the new attacks started. Very serious electronic torture began, such as sleep deprivation, forced to sleep, microwave attacks, directed energy weapon attacks, reading my thoughts, dream manipulation, dream interrogation, false memory injections, V2K or hearing voices, but not all the time in my case. Pictures sent to the brain directly, not through my eyes, electronic rape and more, attacking on the brain, the heart, and the stomach from the satellites while I'm sleeping at night. It is continuing almost every day. Ears are ringing for 24/7, 365. It's very annoying. However, the most painful ones were relentless body attacks by microwave from the neighbors. I didn't know what I should have done, and I just endured the pain. My health became worse there. I bought almost all the available shielding goods and EMF meters from a shop, but none of them did save me. I thought I could not withstand the pain any longer and thought about suicide many times. I got cancers and had operations twice, followed by chemotherapy and radiation treatment. I lost weight heavily. I couldn't take a deep breath, and I could barely eat. Since I was taking care of my mother at that time, it was the toughest time for me in my life. Fortunately, friends of mine extended their kind help, preparing meals and accompanying me to the hospitals, doing shopping, and so on. Then, thanks to my friends' help, I could survive. No matter how many times I changed the key of my home, I could not protect to break in. Also, the security cameras I prepared did not succeed. break-ins did continue. My mother collapsed in May 2012 due to a heart attack and passed away 2 months later. In October of that year, I moved to a smaller apartment. That was 8 times of my relocation since harassment started in 1998. A few months later, again, the same harassment of break-in and chemical spray began in my new apartment. They have broken my refrigerator and microwave oven. They also have stolen a lot of things, including valuable jewelries. I have no intention to move anymore, but I have to leave home to escape from their persistent electric harassment attack from the next apartment. As I experienced cancer operations in the past, I have no room to get further radiation. I usually sleep in super facilities in and around the Tokyo area and go back home for laundry and mail checks twice a week. My neighbors and the landlord are cooperating with my perpetrators and joining with the EMF attacks and break-in. From my past experiences, I've noticed that the police, religious groups, gang called Yakuza in Japan, neighbors, and a lot of unknown people, from kids to aged people, are joining in this harassment game, either as their jobs or for money. Foreign agencies may be involved in this. Also, big tech companies and other major companies, universities, as well as certain hospitals are also joining in this secret program. To a certain degree, I believe the mass media, in a sense, could be an accomplice. In December of 2012, I happened to find the victims group on the net. Then I visited their office in Tokyo. To my surprise, I came to know there are a lot of victims throughout Japan. So I finally, at the end of 2012, I recognized I was a targeted individual for the first time since my targeted life started. I wanted to know that who is doing this heinous and nefarious organized crime. What is the purpose of that? I began researching this crime eagerly. I became a member of the Overseas Victims Group of FFCHS or PACT, and I have learned a lot from them by listening to their podcast and reading their newsletters. Now I understand this is an extremely huge global crime, and there are a lot of victims called targeted individuals all over the world. And many of them are desperately seeking help, like Japanese TIs. without getting help from anywhere. TIs are struggling and surviving every day. Some of them have committed suicide. Some have committed serious crimes. And quite many TIs have experienced psychiatric hospitalization in Japan too. The global targeted program must be stopped immediately and should be exposed to the public. Thank you for your attention.
我是周一宙，来自湖北省。我遭受这项精神控制技术已经10年了。10年前我还是高中生。我第一次听到这个技术造成的传音入密是在课堂上，尤其是这种传音还有方向性、蒙骗性很强。当时我受到了误导，以为是我的同学在课堂上议论和辱骂我，我不想理会。但这些声音一直在激怒我，并且试图占据我所有的注意力。在这种精密的操控和设计之下，我的决策和心理逐渐走向他们所想要达到的状态。包括不限于学业受阻、精神低落、社交孤立。他们选择在青少年时期人生转折点对我开展这样的迫害，十分的阴险恶毒。因为作为一个学生，我的心智尚未健全，没有社会阅历，没有经济来源。一旦家庭对我失去信任，我就毫无抵抗能力。同时我在学业的关键时期遭到了这样的迫害，使得我再也不能正常的学习、工作、交友。我完全被扼杀在摇篮里，实时的被锁在了社会底层。直到现在我依然长期被笼罩在这种折磨中。最初的传音和蒙骗只是为了制造争端，让我们失去社会的信任。在此之后，这个技术的獠牙就完全暴露出来了。他们24小时不断地向我传送恐怖变态的信息，通过电磁波和体内的纳米材料调控我的情绪，并且让我不断地产生非自愿的生理反应，包括头痛、头晕、失去记忆、心脏病发作，强迫的思维、面部表情不自主的变化，身体各部位的痉挛等等。尤其他们完全不让我的大脑进行正常休息，试图用24小时不停歇的传音强迫我的大脑一刻也不停地进行运转。与此同时，当我快要睡着的时候，他们会突然的把我叫醒。在我睡着之后，他们也可以用技术强迫我醒来，通常是心脏加速、抽搐、电击等等。这不是一般性质的虐待，更类似于审讯犯人的酷刑。只有在军事和战争领域才能想象到这种折磨人的刑讯。我认为他们犯下了反人类的酷刑。在中国，这些受害者的症状都十分的典型且高度一致。但是，这个技术没有进入大众的视野，也超出一般人的认知范围。只要我们说出自己的症状，我就面临着被精神病的严重问题。这些年来，有越来越多的学生找到了我们，抱怨自己的遭遇。我认为这个事情很严峻，危害不可估量。我提议世界应该立马对这种反人类的酷刑展开调查。以下这是我的电子邮箱，有更多的信息可以联系我。
Hi everyone, my name is Dora. I'm a victim in Anhui China, and I was victimized in 2019 July. My hometown is Anhui Province, and I live in Beijing. The sudden appearance of those wells happened when I was having dispute and conflicts with the outside world. At that time, I had a dispute with one person, and then I called police. Recording that day, my mood was unstable because I couldn't stand being framed. After watching the surveillance video, the police found them. But after half a month, I watching TV at home, and several people's vows suddenly happened in my head. And they continued to scold me and humiliate me. They were very arrogant. The was getting louder and louder. And they scolded me every minute for several months. This made me extremely painful. They always intended to remind me of torture and scold that I have suffered, and to arouse my reaction with continued pain. They continued to intensity conflicts in my life, and I began to doubt the surroundings. At first, I was disturbed them. I thought it was high-tech behavior done by a neighbor or someone who had a dispute with me half a month ago. But after searching and inquiring, I found that the neighbors and the people around don't know it. In fact, they couldn't do it. But the false information is given to me by the walls in my head, and the mental stimulation they gave me did make me have all kinds of self-behaviors. I promise they are different. This is just because I fell into their trap. They use information similar to create false scenes and contradictions, hypnotize me and brainwash me, and induce my behavior to be close to the typical symptoms of mental illness. Those 24 hours under uninterrupted wells transmission give me no chance to breathe and no environment for independent thinking. Under extreme shock, pressure, and panic, I gave constantly. When I told my experience to people around me, this happened to be that they expect to see. I asked people around me to help, but they usually think I am mental ill. I went to the hospital and slowly discovered that the mental illness is only judged by symptoms, and there is not enough evidence to confirm it. I turned to the police, but they did not believe me and asked me to collect evidence to prove the existence of this technology. The situation is very terrible. I don't have enough ability to collect this evidence, and in this case, it's difficult for me to get understanding by the people around me.